Chapter 20, The Gypsy's Story. Would Gresdotty Esh refuse to tell them where the schnitz was? Nancy and Bess wondered. Since he had pronounced it a dangerous place from which people had disappeared, it was unlikely that he would reveal its location. Nancy, however, finally persuaded him to tell her where the place was. He hesitated a long time, then finally said, "Go 4 miles north from here. You will see a lane running through a field that has not been tilled for years. The road is overgrown and rutty. Nobody uses it, but you can't miss it if you keep your eyes open." On a hunch, Nancy asked whether there was another house on the property, some distance from the main building. Gresdotty Esh nodded, saying that the old Holt family had several children. The father had built houses for them in various locations on the property. Was one of the women named Rachel Holt? Nancy asked. The old man looked at her searchingly and asked how she happened to know of a Rachel Holt, who had died 50 years before. Nancy said that she had seen an old Bible with the name in it. "That's the farm," he said. "But I'm telling you again, stay away from it." "Why is it dangerous?" Bess spoke up. The old man took a deep breath, then began his story. He used so many Pennsylvania Dutch words and phrases with his English that it was difficult for the girls to understand him. But after they had questioned him several times, Nancy and Bess finally got the gist of the tale. A long time ago, Gresdotty Esh related, when the Holts lived on the farm, some members of their family vanished mysteriously and were never seen again. Neighbors concluded that there was a hex on the family. One day, a band of gypsies came along and set up their tents on the property. Old Mr. Holt was furious, Gresdotty said. He was sure the gypsies would bring him even worse luck. He ordered them away, but they only moved to a woods on his property. It seemed that old Mr. Holt was not aware of this, but several of his children went to the encampment and became friendly with the gypsies. One of the women was a beautiful young fortune teller. Mr. Holt's eldest son and she fell in love and planned to marry. The old man found out and stopped the marriage by threatening to disinherit his son. The fortune teller was furious. She told him that she knew the secret of why members of his family had disappeared, but she would never tell him unless he consented to the marriage. It was a terrible choice for the old man to make, but he decided to keep his son at home. Later, people said that the gypsy woman, out of love for the young man, had left him a clue to the secret. She had written it down in English on a piece of paper and hidden it in a table which she had left behind for her beloved. Rumor had it that this table somehow had been acquired by the gypsies from the collection in George Washington's home. As Gresdotty Esh finished the story, Nancy and Bess glanced at each other. Was this the table for which Roger Holt had been searching? Mr. Esh told the girls that the present owner of the property, Mr. Fuller, had also had bad luck on the farm. No one in his family had disappeared, but his cattle had become ill and died. He had had poor crops and several accidents, and illness had hounded the family. "Who is operating the farm now?" Nancy asked. "No one," the old man replied. "The Fullers have left there, but they have not put the property up for sale. I do not know whether they intend to come back." Nancy concluded that this might explain why Roger Holt and his wife had chosen this particular place in which to hide. He was trying to find out what the secret was. Should he discover it, and the answer was something that might bring him a lot of money, he no doubt would offer to buy back the property. A faraway look came into Gresdotty's eyes. Then he said, "You say that maybe Manda Kreutz is hiding on the Fuller property?" "I'm afraid so," Nancy answered. "I'm going to go there and try to find her. Have you any idea what makes the place dangerous, so I could avoid any trouble?" The old man said it was a mystery to him and that he had never heard anything to give him the slightest clue as to what the secret was. But the few people who know the story avoid the place like the plague. Nancy thanked Gresdotty Esch for his information and promised to be very careful in her search. He smiled and said he hoped that Manda would be safe at home soon and that her papa would not be too harsh with her. "Manda is pretty and she is a good worker," he said. "She will soon get a husband and her papa will not have to worry," he added, chuckling. The girls chuckled too, recalling that Melinda had said the same thing. They said goodbye and left. Nancy wanted to start immediately for the Fuller farm, but Bess protested. "Nancy Drew! After all you've heard, you're going to go there?" "Yes." "Well, you'll take somebody except just me," she announced firmly. "We'll collect George and half a dozen other people." Nancy laughed. "Where are we going to get all these people?" Bess said she did not know, but they were not going alone. The girls continued to discuss the matter as they drove off. "You're hinting that I call in the police, Bess," said Nancy. "I don't want to do that. We haven't one definite thing to go on. Dragging officers out on what may be a wild goose chase wouldn't be right. What I propose to do is find out whether Mr. and Mrs. Holt are really hiding at the Fuller farm. And if Manda is there working for them, I want to get her away before I call in the police. We don't want Manda to get any bad publicity." Bess finally conceded that Nancy was right. "But it's getting late in the day. I won't hear of your going until tomorrow morning." "All right," Nancy agreed. Presently she remarked that it was likely the furniture thief and his wife were using Manda as a front. So far as the Amish girl knew, the couple were honest. "Manda has led a sheltered life," said Nancy. "She would probably believe any story the Holts might tell her and pass it on to any unexpected visitors." "Of course, the unexpected visitors aren't supposed to include you and George and me," said Bess. "Roger Holt tried to brain us in that little cabin. No telling what he'll do if we show up at his real hideout." Nancy did not comment on this remark. Instead, she said, "I'm convinced now that the woman who screamed in the woods and ran away was either Manda or Mrs. Holt. With the Amish-type head covering, it's hard to distinguish faces at a distance." Bess's face took on a worried look at once. She suggested that the secret danger connected with the property might have caused the woman to scream. "Maybe it's some kind of a witch or other hex," she murmured. "It probably was only a snake," said Nancy. At the Glicks farm, Nancy and Bess related their latest news. The children and their parents were intrigued. "What is a gypsy like?" Becky asked. "And how do you tell fortunes?" Her mother explained, then said, "There is no more sense to fortune-telling than there is to hexing. Now we will talk no more about nonsense." The visitors took the cue, changed the subject, and later helped Mrs. Glick with preparations for supper. Glancing outside, Nancy saw Becky and Henner playing in the barnyard. As she watched, the little boy raised a slingshot. Nancy was amazed that his parents would let him use this dangerous plaything. Henner was very proficient and could make a stone whistle through the air a long distance. "Henner would make a good hunter," Nancy remarked to the boy's mother. "He has very accurate aim with his slingshot." Mrs. Glick agreed, but said that once in a while he became erratic and hit something he had not intended to. "But he is improving every day," she said. Directly after supper, the three girls took a walk and discussed the mystery again. They had just started back to the house when Mrs. Glick called to them. "Telephone call for you from home, Bess," she said. Bess hurried into the house. The other girls followed, thinking that there might be some news for them, too. As they stepped through the door, Bess was saying, "Hello?" She listened for a few seconds, then hung up. Suddenly, Bess burst into tears. End of chapter 20.